Dalvin Cook's media tour is finally over. He is going to play football, agrees to a one-year deal with the Jets. Per Pro Football Talk, it is $7 million of base salary, up to $1.6 million in incentives, of course. And, I mean, I think the question right now, before we get to Breece Hall, because he's off the pup, is what does Dalvin Cook have left in the tank for the New York Jets?
Well, I think he's a good player. Is he the guy that he was 3 or 4 years ago? No, and he's coming off his own injury as well, right? So he's not going to be able to practice for about another week either. But what I will say is that I think he's still, fairly efficient, right? I mean, this is a guy who's had 4 straight years of over 1,300 yards from scrimmage, and he is averaging, over the last couple of years, he's doing okay in terms of fantasy points. Last year, I believe he was a top 20 fantasy running back. As you see it there on your screen, here's all the stats that you've seen. Obviously, again, 8 touchdowns last year, averaging 4.4 yards per rush attempt, almost 1,200 rushing yards. Here's what I will say. The reason he's not with Minnesota is contractual, not effectiveness. That's the most important thing here. And I think that Dalvin Cook signing is very much about Breece Hall. So, Connor, you work for SNY. You've covered the Jets for years and years and years. What's the talk inside the building about Breece Hall? What does this Dalvin Cook signing mean for how the Jets feel about Breece Hall and where he is in his recovery?
I think it's wanting to be very careful with the young player. That's coming off a significant injury, right?
Sure.
I mean, if Breece Hall was given 25 touches out of the gate week 1, coming off that ACL from Denver last year, that would be a Adrian Peterson type recovery. It would be insane. So I think for the Jets, it's not pushing Breece Hall into a corner or anything like that. It's how do we effectively keep both of these guys healthy throughout an entire course of a season, and most importantly, Breece Hall. And Dalvin Cook allows you to do that. And to your point, Barry, about maybe his demise being a little bit exaggerated, because he wasn't Dalvin Cook of 2 or 3 years ago, but still, I mean, 52 missed tackles forced last year. He averaged 53 missed tackles forced the previous 3 seasons. Not much of a difference. 30 run runs of 10-plus yards last year. He averaged 37 the previous 3 seasons. 3.16 yards after contact per attempt last year. His career average is 3.04. So I don't think Dalvin Cook is that much different from his prime years. Is he that? No. But the Jets believe they're getting more talent to the backfield that clearly had a void.
Understand, of course, last year, by the way, the Vikings offense was completely different as well, so there's a little bit of an adjustment there. He was a top 14 fantasy running back last season, was running back 14 as well. The thing that I think is important here is that I think this is about as good a situation as Dalvin Cook could have landed in, given where we are at the moment, right? I mean, barring something where Josh Jacobs is like, I'm not playing this entire year, or Jonathan Taylor, something like this. Like, there wasn't a job out there where he could walk in and have the same role that he had in Minnesota. So going to New York and the Jets, where there's an opportunity there because Breece Hall is recovering from this serious injury, and because this is an offense that wants to use multiple running backs. We've seen Saleh do that. He is from the Kyle Shanahan tree, right? We've seen, we even saw a little bit last year was Michael Carter and Breece Hall. Yes, then Breece Hall sort of overtook that. But think about this offense this year with Aaron Rodgers under center and Nathaniel Hackett calling the plays. You go back to 2021. That was the last year that Hackett was the offensive coordinator for the Packers and Aaron Rodgers was his quarterback. In that year, Aaron Jones, 15 touches a game. He averaged 15 fantasy points per game. He was running back 11 in fantasy points per game. A.J. Dillon averaged 13 touches a game, averaged basically 11 fantasy points per game. He was running back 31. And I think that's about right. Obviously, Jones and Dillon are very different running backs style-wise from Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. But I think in terms of usage, I think that's about right. When fully healthy, Breece Hall is going to be the guy. But Dalvin Cook is still going to get 13 touches a game in a good offense that wants to keep it close, play good defense. Rodgers wants a balanced offense here. And so I have Dalvin Cook at running back 25. I had him at 29. I moved him up to 25 in this with this new ranking, right? And so the idea here is that I think he's I take it back. I'm sorry, he's 25. I'm sorry, he's 26. James Cook is 25. I have the Cook brothers back-to-back, 25 and 26.
Symmetry.
Cook stack. I have James ahead of Dalvin. But so I have Dalvin at 26, right? And I think that's about right. He's like a mid-tier RB2. flex play, kind of that guy?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing to me is that they're paying him $7 million as a base salary, which I think is pretty significant and speaks to the fact that he's going to be important for them. But to me, Connor, my question is, when we get to the fantasy playoffs, week 13, 14, say that Breece Hall is fully healthy, do you think it's going to be 60-40 in favor of Breece, or is this a true kind of 50-50 situation potentially?
I might even crank it up higher. I might go 65 for Breece. I think they like him that much. The whole purpose of this signing, and sure, Dalvin's coming back from a shoulder injury. He's not going to practice this week. He also, I believe, has a child. He's going to be a dad. So it's going to be a little while before he's in camp.
For Dalvin Cook?
It's a lot happening for Dalvin Cook. But the point of this signing is for the best version of Breece Hall to appear in November, December, January. The fantasy playoffs, Breece Hall is going to be insanely valuable. If you can stomach that and wait it out and you can get through September, Breece Hall will be an absolute weapon in fantasy for you. But will we have that patience?
Do you think it's going to be like Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, like
I
a couple years ago, that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a good
and by the way, and my ranks reflect that, right? So I have Breece Hall at running back 14. I have Dalvin Cook, as I said, at running back 26. And so again, Breece Hall is a upper tier RB2, and that if you're only ranking him for the second half of the season, he's a top 10 fantasy running back, even with Dalvin Cook there. Again, Aaron Jones, even with A.J. Dillon getting 13 touches a game, but with Aaron Rodgers under center and Hackett calling the plays, Aaron Jones was running back 11 on a points per game basis in 2021. I mean, so Breece Hall is I think Breece Hall, fully healthy, might be better than Aaron Jones. And no one loves Aaron Jones the way I do, as I excitedly throw my pen. I just, you know what I mean? But even with Breece getting the kind of volume that we think he's going to get, there's still a role for Dalvin Cook to be a productive fantasy player, again, as kind of a flex play. I'm at running back 26. Like I said, Dillon was running back 31 under Hackett in 2021. So I actually think this is a good signing for Dalvin Cook. And it's ultimately, I think, it's not great for Breece Hall, but you knew they were going to bring in somebody.
I'll add one Jets-specific note to this, too, being around the team so much. I think they're really excited, and I know this wasn't great for Cook in Minnesota last year, but the Jets are excited to throw the ball to him, too. The Jets are excited to throw to their running backs in the pass game, and it's not just having Breece on the field, but also having Cook on the field to help with that.
Yeah, a couple other things, too. Our friend Patrick Doherty, RotoPat on Twitter, I think he makes a really good point that he said that Breece Hall's ADP was fundamentally nonsensical before this, which I think is right. It didn't make sense that Breece was going so high, but now, as often happens with these things, it could go too far the other way. Because the other thing with the Jets is their first 6 weeks of the season, Connor, is absolutely brutal.
Yeah,
They just play a who's who of Super Bowl contenders. Then it gets much easier. So I think as Breece starts to find his legs, find his footing, they're going to get much more favorable matchups, more favorable game scripts, and he could be a monster by the way, second week of the fantasy playoffs, they're playing Houston, which is exactly what you want.
Mark my words right here. We'll go ahead, Pete, do me a favor. Pete's our producer.
Mark his words.
Mark my words here, and just cut this up and we just roll this back, I think probably at the beginning of week 5. So you'll see some fantasy teams that are 1-3 heading into week 5, and they're going to be panicking because they've been starting Breece Hall. He hasn't been getting a ton of work, tough matchups, everything. He's going to be the greatest buy low in the world. To your point, the first 6 weeks are brutal for the Jets, and then after there. So honestly, week 5 is about when we're going to be talking about Breece Hall as a great buy low candidate, and there'll be some managers in your league, 1-3, panicking, ready to sell Breece Hall for pennies on the dollar. There you go. Swoop in. Take advantage. Vulture in.
The AFC.
I don't know. That was like a
vulture?
it was like a vulture thing. It was kind of
terrifying.
A little
like
terrifying.
A Spider-Man villain.
I looked at myself, and a little like a Spider-Man villain.
Yeah.
The vulture.
Yeah.
You might have to bring back the
What was the
draft
name
night
of the
vampire
What was the name of
costume.
the villain? What was the name in the in No Way and Homecoming? What did Michael Keaton play?
You've lost me.
What was the,
That's
what?
tough to do.
Huh? That's the vulture.
Vulture, right. I didn't. I knew
He is the literal villain.
No, he's the
green vulture.
Yes, he's the vulture in Homecoming, the first Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, and it's Michael Keaton in the big bird outfit, which is sort of an homage to his Birdman movie, the whole thing. But anyway, I didn't know what the actual name of the supervillain was in that movie. I forgot it for a second.
It is the vulture.
It is the vulture.
So you look both like the vulture and a vulture.
And Michael Keaton,
The double
and Hollywood leading man Michael Keaton. I'll take that.
More in the Birdman phase of his career, though, than the Batman phase, I would argue. But that's okay.
More vulture than Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
is what
I'd
you're
say
saying.
So. Yeah.
All right. Well, whatever. I'll take it.
Zeke?
By the way,
AFC stayed busy.
cut to Michael Keaton. Kids, I'm going to show you this movie of mine that's on Peacock, and what's this guy? I don't look anything like that asshole. What's going on? I'm sorry, Michael Keaton. Apologies. I've always enjoyed your work. So all right.
All right. So all right.
What is your favorite Mr. Michael Keaton? Is it Mr. Mom?
No.
Your favorite Michael
Never
Keaton
seen
movie?
it. Never seen Homecoming.
I haven't seen Homecoming. That's why I didn't get the reference initially.
Which is pretty rare for
Spider-Man.
How did
you to not pick up
have
a
you-
movie reference.
That's a great movie.
Yeah. haven't
You're a
seen it.
Spider-Man guy, but that's the one you haven't seen?
I'm like a Spider-Man 2 guy, more of a Dr. Octopus type
Yes,
operator.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I aligned
Ock.
with that. Yeah, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and then I
Yeah.
was like,
I'm
all right,
gonna-
this is
I'm going to
enough.
make a ruling. I'm going to make a ruling right now.
Yeah.
Your children are not allowed by law to wear Spider-Man clothes until you've watched Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming.
Seems like a very strange law to
I'm just
impose.
saying,
Okay.
I see the Instagram of your kids running around in Spider-Man
Yeah,
outfits, and
I
who
like
knew
it.
their dad was this fake Spider-Man fan,
Fake Spider-Man
this
fan.
like Johnny Come Lately, this sort of like bandwagon guy.
Johnny Come
Yeah,
Lately.
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
rectify
Watch a
that.
whole movie. Don't watch just a couple of clips on Instagram, for the love of God.
Okay.
Do the work.
All right. I'll
Put
watch
it in.
I'll watch Spider-Man Homecoming. We can dedicate some to
Tomorrow. That's coming.
Yeah.
I'm gonna quiz you
Okay.
tomorrow.
I'm going to pass with flying colours because I love the vulture right opposite me.
There you
Me
go.
up on my floors.
All right. The AFC East was quite busy yesterday as the Patriots agreed to a one-year deal with Ezekiel Elliott worth up to $6 million. Zeke tweeting out 1-5 all the way live as he will wear number 15 for the Patriots. I think the question everybody has is not really about Zeke, though, here. It feels like the question is, what does this do to Ramondre Stevenson as soon as the news came in?
Yeah, you know what? It's twofold, right? It's not ideal, but it's not ideal, but it's not as much of a death sentence as you might think. I know this can sound weird here, but I actually think this is the best case scenario for Ramondre Stevenson, and I'm buying the dip, as it were. Now, look, I moved Ramondre Stevenson down a little bit. I moved him from 10 to 13, right? But
Buying the dip is great. I can't
I
let it
appreciate
go.
that. I'm just here to entertain you two, jamokes.
It's good to come in and laugh.
Yeah.
Look, here's the deal, right? The fact of the matter is that the Patriots are always going to sign someone. All due respect to like Pierre Strong and J.J. Taylor, and they were always going to sign somebody. And when you think about who they could have signed, they could have signed Dalvin Cook. They could have signed Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette was a strong possibility to be there. And the fact that Ezekiel Elliott isn't nearly as much of a pass catcher at this stage of his career as somebody like Fournette or Cook, which basically leaves the entire passing game role to Ramondre Stevenson, I think is a good thing. Look, he was going to lose some touchdowns. There's a concern here, right? Ezekiel Elliott is still very good in short yardage. Last year he had 22 goal-to-go carries. It was tied for the second most. He scored in 9 straight games, 12 rushing touchdowns last year, top 4 among running backs as well. In fact, he's top 5 in the NFL last year on touchdown rate in terms of carries inside the 5-yard line. Just a stat that lets you know what you sort of know if you watch football, which is that when you give the ball to Zeke in close, he's very effective. This is a guy who can get into the end zone. Meanwhile, that same stat, touchdown rate on carries inside the 5-yard line, Ramondre Stevenson 23rd last year. So that is something where he struggles, as we see footage here of Zeke getting into the end zone, just pounding away. And so my expectation is, yes, you're going to see Zeke get some touches. I do think both these guys have value. Like, again, I have Ramondre Stevenson as a top 13 fantasy running back. 15 or more touches in 14 to 17 games last year. He had a 17% target share, highest among running backs. Even with Damian Harris there, when Damian Harris got some goal-to-go carries as well. Ramondre Stevenson was still very, very good. But does Ezekiel Elliott have some flex appeal, some deeper league appeal, 12-team and deeper league appeal? I think he does, because remember last year the Patriots, in a year in which the Patriots guys were a complete disaster on offense. They had no real offensive coordinator. They had no identity. Even last year, in a bad offensive year, they were still 16th in goal-to-go rushing attempts. Bill Belichick likes to run when he gets in close. You go all the way, whether it's LeGarrette Blount or Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson. There's been years and years when they get, when they get in close, they like to run. And so a proven veteran like Ezekiel Elliott, to me, he comes in at running back 40 for me. So he's a low-end RB4, but he's also one of the most important insurance running backs if you draft Ramondre Stevenson, because if something were to happen to Stevenson, we've seen him miss a game here or there over the course of his career, Zeke would be an easy top 15 running back.
Yeah, Ramondre, I know he only had the 7 carries inside the 5, but he did have 19 carries in the red zone just in general, and that was 68% of New England's carries, and randomly he only averaged 1.1 yards per attempt. So I'd be a bit concerned that maybe that feeds into the idea that they're going to give it to Zeke inside the 20. And I think that does remove some of his value, because a lot of Ramondre's value was, one, workload, which we always knew was going to be lessened by signing. Most likely that has now happened, but then also just touchdown regression with his carries inside the 20. So I think his ceiling goes down, Ramondre, but yeah, in terms of, I guess, just overall value, he's still going to provide it, and he's going to be a top 20 running back. But I don't think, if Zeke is around, I don't really see Ramondre getting to be a top 5 running back in fantasy. I don't think that was on the cards beforehand.
That's exactly the point. That I completely agree. What this signing does, it doesn't lower his floor, because the floor is always going to be the rushing. It lowers his upside, because there was a scenario where if Ezekiel Elliott didn't sign, and it was just Ramondre Stevenson and like the Pierre Strongs of the world, then yes, top 5 running back in fantasy definitely was in the range of outcomes for Ramondre Stevenson. I think as long as Zeke is healthy, that's off the table. But I'm buying the dip.
On the exact opposite of limiting upside, it feels like for Tony Pollard, this is massive. Now that we have confirmation, Zeke Elliott not going back to Dallas, Dalvin Cook officially with the Jets, the veteran running back market is beginning to thin out. And when you look at Tony Pollard in Dallas, yes, we love what we saw from Deuce Vaughn in preseason, but we're not going to wildly overreact yet to the preseason. That it's Pollard's show in the Dallas backfield, especially after the news of Zach Martin's holdout being over with a reworked deal.
One of only 6 running backs last year with over 1,200 total yards and 12 touchdowns last season. From week 8 to 16, he was the second best running back in fantasy, so we've seen him be kind of an elite fantasy running back for an extended period of time. He's had 13 career games with 16 or more touches, right? And in those games, he's averaging 19.6 fantasy points per game. That would have been running back 3 last season. We expect him to get a significant workload now. Again, no Ezekiel Elliott. And so there was rumors that he might come back. So now when you're sitting there going like it's Tony Pollard and he's competing with Malik Davis and Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn, like honestly, it's going to be the Tony Pollard show. He's my running back 6. I have him ahead of ADP. There were a number of running backs, I think, that were kind of sneaky fantasy winners when Ezekiel Elliott announced he was going to the Patriots, when Dalvin Cook, it was announced that he's going to go to the Jets, and that includes Tony Pollard in Dallas. He no longer has to worry about either of those guys. Zeke was more of the concern. Would he come back on a lesser deal? I'd argue Joe Mixon. There was concern about Joe Mixon. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. I would argue James Conner. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show, but again, no veteran presence there as well. The Miami guys too, by the way, right? I think Dalvin Cook was rumored to be going to Miami, and so Devon Achane was always, sort of being drafted. He's kind of this darling. And I love Achane as a Texas A&M guy. I think Achane's the most talented running back on that roster, and it'll take us. It may not be that way from week 1, but second half of the season, I think Achane's going to have a big year. But Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, who are more or less kind of free in drafts right now, going very, very late, they get a boost to their fantasy value because they're obviously going to be used with no Dalvin Cook in town.
Yeah, I think Pollard is the big winner of everyone from yesterday because, to your point, no Zeke, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, those were the guys who were going to cut into his value, and the fact that now it's going to be his show on an elite offense. The Cowboys project as a top 5 offense. They're going to be a juggernaut. And the fact that Pollard, now that is his show. I also think that just free agency decisions from teams, they shed light on how a team values a player. Like the fact that the Jets go out and sign Dalvin Cook, that says Breece Hall is not ready in the start of the season. The fact that the Cowboys are ready to roll with Pollard, they think that he's physically able to be the number 1 guy and take on that load. And if he's ready for that, then he can absolutely be the number 1 player in fantasy this year. That's on the cards for him.
I'll also say I actually think the money, it's interesting if you hear any of this inside the building over there with the Jets, Connor, but I also think the money for getting Dalvin Cook is also about somewhat appeasing Aaron Rodgers.
100%.
Rodgers wants a veteran back there. He wants multiple running backs. He's just like, listen, you got a kid coming off of an ACL and then Michael Carter and Bam Knight.
Right.
Like, come on, get me somebody real back here. And so, Breece Hall becomes now a luxury, not he's got to get back soon because you've got somebody in Dalvin Cook who is a proven all-pro running back. Also, to your point about Pollard being a big winner, Zach Martin, They restructured his deal, no issues there. That's great for the Cowboys offensive line.
Yep.
And to piggyback off of that, yeah, two things. One, Rodgers took a massive pay cut. He didn't do that to put money back in Woody Johnson's pockets.
No, he did not.
He came to the Jets and said, can we get more players when I do this? And the Jets said, absolutely. And it won't stop there. They'll be active at the trade deadline if they need something, but this is why that base salary was so high. And Jay, to your point, protecting young assets. Breece Hall is under contract for the next couple of years. Tony Pollard's now playing the year-to-year game. So Dallas is ready to run Tony Pollard into the ground while the Jets are protecting Breece Hall because he is a long-term asset for them.
Yeah,
so,
I think also we just forget that Breece Hall, he was so good last year, but he played like 8 games in his entire career, and this team has Super Bowl aspirations. So I think Rodgers he wants that veteran presence.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, okay? Respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.